From elusive prison breakouts to stunning body counts, discover the darkest minds in history as we explore the chilling world of serial killers. Welcome to the Mind of a Monster quiz. Viewer discretion is highly recommended. Which serial killer famously crafted masks from the skin of his victims? Ted Bundy, Ed Gein, John Wayne Gacy, or Gary Ridgway? In the 1950s, Ed Gein, a scary American killer, made masks and other creepy things from his victims' skin, and his story inspired lots of scary stories. Which serial killer was known to have a fascination with police work, even applying to become an officer? Richard Ramirez, Rodney Alcala, Dennis Rader, or David Berkowitz? Dennis Rader, also called the BTK, really liked cops and wanted to be one, but he couldn't because he wasn't healthy enough. Who was the first female serial killer in the United States? Aileen Wuornos, Jane Toppin, Belle Gunness, or Lavinia Fisher? Lavinia Fisher might have been the first woman serial killer in the U.S. She and her husband ran an inn in Charleston in the early 1800s. People say they poisoned and robbed guests. Which serial killer was famously dubbed the Clown Killer? Albert Fish, H.H. Holmes, John Wayne Gacy, or Dennis Rader? John Wayne Gacy, known as the Clown Killer, terrified people in the 1970s by pretending to be a friendly clown at public events. But he secretly brought young men to his home in Chicago, where he brutally murdered at least 33 victims, hiding their bodies under his house. In what year was Ted Bundy finally executed? 1984, 1987, 1989, 1991. Ted Bundy, a notorious serial killer, was executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison. He was responsible for the brutal murders of at least 30 young women across multiple states in the 1970s. Which serial killer was the inspiration for the fictional character Norman Bates in Psycho? Ed Gein, Gary Ridgway, Richard Kuklinski, David Berkowitz? Ed Gein, a criminal from Wisconsin who stole from graves and killed, shaped scary movies by showing how terror can lurk in everyday life. Who was known as the Green River Killer? Dennis Rader, Gary Ridgway, Jeffrey Dahmer, or Ed Kemper? Gary Ridgway, called the Green River Killer, targeted sex workers and runaways. He avoided being caught for a long time until DNA technology caught him in 2001. He was found guilty of 49 murders and will spend his life in jail. Ted Bundy escaped from prison how many times? Once, twice, 3 times, or 4 times? Ted Bundy broke out of prison twice. The first time, in June 1977, he jumped out of a window and was caught again 6 days later. His second escape was on December 30th, 1977, when he crawled through a ceiling hole without being seen. Aileen Wuornos claimed to be a victim of what before committing her murders? Theft, abandonment, abuse, fraud. Aileen Wuornos said she was defending herself against rape and assault from the men she killed. She claimed her actions were because she felt attacked or threatened. Which serial killer was active in London's Whitechapel district in 1888? Jack the Ripper, the Zodiac Killer, the Boston Strangler, or the Hillside Strangler? Jack the Ripper terrorized London's Whitechapel district in 1888, notoriously murdering at least 5 women with extreme violence. The killer's true identity remains a mystery, a lasting symbol of unsolved crime. H. Holmes is best known for creating what? A torture chamber, a murder castle, a maze of mirrors, a criminal syndicate. H. Holmes is infamous for his murder castle, a building in Chicago designed with hidden passages, trapdoors, and a basement for disposing of his victims, constructed to facilitate his crimes during the 1893 World's Fair. Which serial killer was known for leaving cryptic messages? The Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, or Gary Ridgway? The Zodiac Killer, active in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s, sent confusing messages and codes to the police and media, some still unsolved. This made the killer famous and the case one of the biggest unsolved mysteries. Richard Ramirez was also known as the Night Stalker, the Grim Sleeper, the I-5 Killer, or the BTK Killer. Richard Ramirez, called the Night Stalker, scared people in Los Angeles and San Francisco from 1984 to 1985 with his break-ins, attacks, and murders. His crimes were very violent, and he avoided getting caught for a long time, causing a lot of fear. The BTK Killer, Dennis Rader, gave himself his nickname, which stands for Break, Take, Kidnap, Bind, Track, Kill, Beat, Torture, Kidnap, Bind, Torture, Kill. The BTK Killer, Dennis Rader, chose his own nickname, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. He used this moniker to describe his method of operation, where he bound, tortured, and ultimately killed his victims. Which serial killer was known as the Nightmare in Nijmegen? Armin Meiwes, Marcel Petiot, Martha Merrick, or Maria Swanenberg? The Nightmare in Nijmegen refers to Marcel Petiot, a French doctor who operated in Paris during World War II. His gruesome actions during wartime earned him this chilling nickname. Who is known as the Monster of the Andes? Pedro Alonso Lopez, Luis Alfredo Garavito, Daniel Camargo Barbosa, or Marcelo Antello? The Monster of the Andes is Pedro Alonso Lopez, a Colombian serial killer who confessed to raping and murdering over 300 young girls in South America during the 1970s. Which killer was known as the Düsseldorf Vampire? Fritz Haarmann, Peter Kürten, Karl Grossman, or Heinrich Pomerenke? Peter Kürten, called the Düsseldorf Vampire, was a German serial killer who scared Düsseldorf in the early 20th century, getting his nickname from these terrible acts. He was caught, found guilty, and executed. Who was an angel of death? A nurse convicted of murdering patients. Donald Harvey, Harold Shipman, Charles Cullen, or Aileen Wuornos? The angel of death nurse convicted of murdering patients is Charles Cullen. He confessed to kill in New Jersey and Pennsylvania by administering lethal doses of medication. Which serial killer operated at the Cecil Hotel? Richard Ramirez, Jack Unterweger, H. Holmes, or Ted Bundy. Richard Ramirez. The Night Stalker is known to have stayed at the hotel during his killing spree. He lived in a room on the top floor of the hotel and paid $14 a night to stay there. Who was convicted for the Moors murders in England? Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, Fred and Rose West, Peter Sutcliffe, or John Wayne Gacy? Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were found guilty of the Moors murders in England. They kidnapped, hurt, and killed 5 young people from 1963 to 1965, hiding their bodies on Saddleworth Moor near Manchester. They were sentenced to spend their lives in prison. Which serial killer was known as the Werewolf of Wysteria? Dennis Rader, Ed Gein, Gary Ridgway, or Albert Fish? Albert Fish, called the Werewolf of Wysteria, did terrible things like hurting and killing. His awful crimes shocked people in the early 20th century. His nickname shows how fierce and brutal he was. Who was dubbed the Grim Sleeper for a supposed 14-year hiatus between killings? Lonnie David Franklin Jr., John Agrew, Charles Albanese, Herman Allen. The Grim Sleeper is Lonnie David Franklin Jr., a serial killer in Los Angeles. He earned the nickname for a supposed 14-year hiatus between his murders, which occurred between 1985 and 2007. Andrei Chikatilo was known by what nickname? The Red Ripper, the Butcher of Rostov, the Siberian Express, or Red Evil. He was called the Butcher of Rostov, or the Rostov Ripper, was a killer in the Soviet Union who hurt and killed at least 52 women from 1978 to 1990. His terrible actions gave him these scary names. Who was the serial killer known for the Toy Box murders? Gary Ray Bowles, Charlie Brandt, David Parker Ray, or Joe Brandt? David Parker Ray, known for the Toy Box murders, was a killer and suspected attacker in New Mexico. He and others did very bad things to women in a special trailer called the Toy Box, made him one of the scariest killers in American history. The term serial killer was first used to describe whom? Ted Bundy, Wayne Williams, David Berkowitz, Charles Lee Duffy. The term serial killer was first used in relation to Ted Bundy. It was FBI profiler Robert Ressler who used the term to describe Bundy's pattern of multiple, sequential murders with a cooling-off period in between. Which serial killer was known as the Genesee River Killer? Alfred Gaynor, Arthur Shawcross, Terry Hankins, or John Price Hayter? The Genesee River Killer was Arthur Shawcross, who operated in Rochester, New York during the late 1980s. He was convicted of murdering 11 women. Who was the serial killer depicted in the film Monster? Aileen Wuornos, Linda Hazard, Lauren Herzog, Juanita Hoyt. The serial killer depicted in the film Monster is Aileen Wuornos, a sex worker who was convicted of murdering 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. Charlize Theron portrayed Wuornos in the film, earning critical acclaim for her performance. The Crossbow is the nickname of which British serial killer? Stephen Griffiths, Peter Sutcliffe, Dennis Nilsson, or Harold Shipman? Stephen Griffiths, called the Crossbow, was a British killer found guilty of murdering 3 women in Bradford, England, from 2009 to 2010. He got this scary name because he cut up his victims and ate parts of them, and used a crossbow in one of the murders. The Freeway Phantom murders took place in which city? Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. The Freeway Phantom murders happened in Washington, D.C. in the early 1970s. At least 6 young African-American girls were kidnapped, hurt, and killed. The name came from finding some victims near highways. The killer has never been identified. Known as the Happy Face Killer, what is the real name of this criminal? Keith Hunter Jesperson, Gary Ridgway, Wilbur Lee Jennings, or Jeffrey Dahmer? The Happy Face Killer is the nickname for Keith Hunter Jesperson, a serial killer active in the 1990s who drew smiley faces on his letters to authorities while on the run. He's serving life sentences for murdering at least 8 women. How many did you get right? Leave it in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you are not scared to take a quiz about haunted objects, click here.